practices, things that have been happening. We are seeing the representatives from the electoral office doing public appearances and talking about issues within our processes around the electoral process, issues around the electoral system. So we decided that, why not have a discussion with our colleagues? And there are some things that as civil society, as a caucus, I know civil society has been raising issues about the electoral process since 2012, and a different supervisor of elections, 2022. And some of those concerns that were raised by different members of civil society still have not been addressed. And here we are preparing for yet another elections. We want to begin, though, with the constitutional references to the electoral process, the House of Representatives, the qualifications for membership of the House of Representatives, disqualifications for membership of the House of Representatives, and elections of members of the House of Representatives. It's a lot, and we may not be able to cover all of it in just one program, but we promise you that we're going to make some effort to have this discussion, to raise awareness on some of the concerns that we have as a caucus, as citizens of Grenada. So to begin, we're going to look at section 29 of the Grenada Constitution Order 1973, which speaks to the House of Representatives. And I don't know if Mr. Ned will indulge me by reading that section for the audience.
Thank you, Cassandra. Section 29, House of Representatives. It says that the House of Representatives shall consist of such number of members as corresponds with the number of constituencies for the time being established for Grenada under section 56 of the Constitution, who shall be elected in accordance with the provisions of section 32 of this Constitution. Subsection 2 says, if any person who is not a member of the House of Representatives is elected to be Speaker of the House of Representatives, he shall, by virtue of holding the office of Speaker, be a member of the House.
Thank you.
Sandra?
Thank you. I'm still maneuvering every time I try to unmute. We can jump right in if there's, Mr. Ned, if you think that there's no need to expound on that section, we can go to section 30.
Well, section 29, first there are references to other sections of the Constitution. So it's necessary that we clarify what these other sections say to us. And section 56 of the Constitution Section 56 of the Constitution speaks of the review of constituency boundaries. So section 29 is saying that we're going to have constituencies. And section 56 is telling you how these constituency boundaries are going to be set up. And the interesting words that you have to pay attention to. And a boundary is one. For those of us who buy land, we know that our boundaries. You get a surveyor, the surveyor comes, and the surveyor sets a mark. And what is within the boundary belongs to you, and what is outside of those marks belongs to your neighbors. Okay, so the Constituency Boundaries Commission shall, in accordance with the provisions of this section, review the number and boundaries of the constituencies into which Grenada is divided, and submit to the Governor General reports either A, showing the constituencies into which it's recommended that Grenada should be divided in order to give effect to the rules as set out in Schedule 2 to this Constitution, or B, stating that in the opinion of the Commission, no alteration is required to the existing number of boundaries constituencies in order to give effect to the said rules. Subsection 2, reports under subsection 1 of this section shall be submitted by the Commission. A, in the case of a first report, after the day upon which this Constitution comes into operation, not more than 5 years from the 25th of August, 1971. And B, in the case of any subsequent report, not less than 2 or more, not less than 2 nor more than 5 years from the date of submission of the last report. So what is important here is that the Commission has the authority to divide Grenada into constituencies. And the word here now is that Grenada is going to be divided into these constituencies. And we all know that we have 15 elected representatives, 1 representative for each of the constituencies that Grenada is divided into. And anytime you divide, and you put boundaries, it means that some will be in the boundary, some will be outside of the boundary. So those are the directives here under sections 56. Anything you want to say, Cassandra?
Trying to put myself in the shoes of someone listening in. And one of the questions I will ask is there a commission responsible for that that's active currently, especially given the fact that we are preparing for a constitutionally due elections? When last was this commission activated? And again, I'm asking this question, maybe even to people in the audience who may have that information. I can't recall, I'm still fairly young, but I can't recall a time in my lifetime when I've heard about the activation of such a commission. And if there is, has the public been made aware of who are the members?
Not to my knowledge, election and boundary commission. Had any changes to these boundaries for some time. So there's always been 15 constituencies, and the demarcations have been more or less the same over the period. And why are there demarcations? Why are there these boundaries? And those are the questions that we want to answer as we delve deeper into sections 30, section 51, 52 of the Constitution that speaks directly to the elector, the person who is going to vote, and it speaks to the candidate, the person who is going to put themselves up to be a representative. So it's important that we look at what the Constitution says and that we discuss it and we understand what it's trying to say to these parties. So section 30, for instance, section 30 speaks to the qualifications for membership of the House of Representatives. So if you want to be a member of the House of Representatives, what are the qualifications that you should have? what are the requirements that you have to fulfill in order that you can be considered to, take part in the elections for the membership of the House of Representatives. And Section 30 says, subject to the provisions of Section 31 of this Constitution, a person shall be qualified to be elected as a member of the House of Representatives if and shall not be so qualified unless A, is a Commonwealth citizen who has attained the age of 18 years. So subsection A says two requirements. A, you must be a Commonwealth citizen, and you must have attained the age of 18 years. And remember, now we're talking about qualification for membership of the House of Representatives. B, has resided in Grenada for a period of 12 months immediately before the date of his nominations for election, or is domiciled and resident in Grenada at that date. And C, is able to speak and, unless incapacitated by blindness or other physical cause, to read the English language with sufficient proficiency to enable him to take an active part in the proceedings of the House. And these are the qualifications. So, qualifications for the membership. What you don't see here is a master's degree in philosophy or political science, anything like that. It says you're able to speak, and unless incapacitated by blindness or other physical cause, to read the English language with sufficient proficiency to enable him to take an active part in the proceedings of the House.
Oh, can I ask a question here, Cassandra? So I just read this out, and to me it seems that seems to be with ignorance. Everybody thought you have to be a lawyer, a doctor, somebody in a high position to run for a House of Representatives. But based on what you're saying here now, does not seem that's the case, right? So an ordinary Grenadian, so-called ordinary Grenadian, who thinks that he owns the right to represent his constituency should be able to contest the election. However, can the party that that person belongs to but they refuse to have him run if he so desire? And would that party violate that section of the Constitution?
Interestingly, the concept of partisan politics is not recognized in the Constitution. Partisan politics is a way that, as Grenadians, we have become independent, and we have gravitated to this concept of representation. And it is something that I think as a nation, we need to really discuss, simply because the intrusion of the partisan politics into the Constitution may be responsible for a lot of the issues of problems that we are experiencing today. The Constitution does not recognize it. What the Constitution recognizes is a system of representation, of constituency representation, where the constituents would directly elect a member to the House of Representatives. And the words are very, very important. They have to directly elect. It means that they must have contact with them. They must have a touch feel. He must be part of, he must be one of them.
Right. So let me. So if the party is to have a meeting, right, to select a candidate for the constituency, right? Can that meeting be open to allow anybody to nominate anybody for that position to run in that constituency without any political backlash from within the party? So let's suppose the parties make a selection for a certain individual and they are choosing a certain individual, just on a party level. Executive level make a decision on who should be running for them, right? Or they give a CV and so on, and they accept that person's CV, right? And but up comes someone to nominate somebody else within that meeting. They look, I want to nominate Mr. Ned to run in that area and represent us. Can the party override that decision if the nomination is tendered?
Okay, well, probably what we should do is to look at what should happen first, and then we look at what happens now that we have become socialized to.
Right.
And what is supposed to happen is that the members of the constituency would choose somebody, and 6 of them have to sign certifying that he is in fact a member of the constituency,
Okay.
and that they are satisfied that he can represent them.
Great.
Because it is all about representation. First and foremost, it's the first and the last thing. It's about representation.
Okay.
Now, let us look at what has happened with the party as an entity. When the party selects a representative for you, whose loyalty does that representative bear? Is his loyalty to the party agenda, or is his loyalty to his constituents? And we have heard that debate over and over in our parliament. And when the speaker says, the ayes have it, it is no longer that they are representing the constituents who would have voted with them, but they are now voting along with party policy.
Okay.
Representation.
Just before you go on, Sheriff, I noted with keen interest that even when you were asking the question, you kept referring to party, because that is how we were socialized. But if you read the Constitution, there is no mention of partisan politics, partisan representation.
And I want to go right to that question, but somebody just asked the question. Does the Constitution say one has to be a member of a party to run?
No.
No.
No. You have to be a member of the constituency.
And how long should one be a member of that constituency to be able to participate in that constituency? Can one live in St. George's and run in St. Andrews as a member of the that constituency? Can he move into St. Andrews within 6 weeks or 6 months before the election and run and put up his name for nomination to run in that constituency?
What the Constitution says is that you have to reside in Grenada for 12 months immediately before the date of elections. That's section 30B. So you must live in Grenada.
Right, in Grenada. So,
you're domiciled and resident in Grenada at that date.
So so then, I had this conversation with Cassandra. Does it mean that I have to, so even if I live in St. Mark's, can I then run in Happy Hill, for example, on election time? If I live in Grenada 12 months prior to election, can I run, live in St. Mark's for 12 months? Can I decide to run in Happy Hill or in St. George's once election is called?
And I think that to answer your question, we have to go to section 32 of the Constitution. And section 32 speaks directly to the persons who are putting up themselves for elections as members of the House of Representatives. And it says, each of the constituencies into which Grenada is divided in accordance with the provisions of Section 56. I spoke about Section 56, the Election Boundaries Commission.
Yes.
Of this constitution shall return one member to the House of Representatives. So the constituency is to return a member
The constituent.
of the constituency to the House of Representatives.
So does that mean that person must be residing there within the 12 months?
Must be a member of the constituency.
Doesn't mean, so there's any length of time for that person to be living there?
But it says 12 months.
12 months.
It says 12 months in Section 30.
Okay. I want to clarify for you. Just want to make sure that we clear on that. There's another question.
We are speaking from the provisions of the Grenada Constitution.
Right.
Section 31 was the last section that I read.
Okay. And there's another, okay, I get that clear. I hope the other people listening probably get this one. However, there's another question. I'm going to elaborate on that one before I ask another question. Cassandra?
Well, I'm here. I think Dave did a good job. But here's the other thing. I know why we're focusing on the constitutional provisions. It is important to note that the 2018 amendments to the Representation of the People Act, which is a legislation that governs the electoral process in Grenada, our elected official made an amendment which states that as a candidate, you can be registered in another polling division, another constituency, and not where you are not running as a candidate. I can't remember the exact words. One of the questions that I've asked, because I know that there have been a lot of debate, even among us who are looking at the constitutional provisions, about the interpretation of Section 32(1). And one of the questions that I keep asking those who we have this discussion with is, if the interpretation was incorrect, why then did our elected officials see it fit to make the amendment? And history, and for those who are older than I am and have been around longer than I have, history has shown us that even with the current administration and past administrations, candidates were required, individuals who were contesting the elections were required to move into the constituency where they were contesting the elections.
Okay. So, okay.
I think I'm a little older, so I can distinctly remember a candidate who had to leave his house and live in rented premises in the constituency that he wanted to run as a candidate. He was living outside of that constituency before, and he had to do it. He had to move into the constituency for the prescribed period.
So if I register in Springs, living in Springs, but not running in Springs, I'm running St. George's, I can vote in Springs for my representative, but we run the town of St. George's. Can I do that?
The amendment, now we have to backtrack a little bit and to clarify that the elections process is governed by, first and foremost, the constitutional provision.
Yes.
Which is the rule, is the supreme law. And then there are acts of parliament that establishes what is called the Representation of the People's Act. And that act describes the process of election and how you go about it. Right? So there are these two laws. Now, the Constitution is the supreme law, and any law that the Parliament makes, if it goes against the constitutional provisions, so the it's null and void to the extent that it goes against the constitutional provisions of the Grenada Constitution. So the Constitution is supreme, and then you have the laws that are made by the Parliament of the country, which must be subject to the constitutional provision. So, for instance, the Constitution prescribes in section 31 that, sorry, in section 30, that qualifications for the member of a House of Representatives, you must be a Commonwealth citizen, and you would have had to have attained the age of 18 years old. So that's a prescription that cannot be changed by an act. So an act of parliament cannot now say that the prescribed age is 21 years. Nor can an act of parliament now say that the citizenship required is a Grenadian citizen or a Belizean citizen or any other citizen. Because it's prescribed in the Constitution that it must be a Commonwealth citizen and you must have attained the age of 18 years of age. And normally you would see that either the word qualified, a qualification, or a prescription. So they talk about the prescribed age. It's a directive. This can't be changed.
Okay. All right. Moving on.
So it is possible that amendments can be made and that amendments can be outside of the what is allowed in the Constitution. That is when the people, the citizenry, have to be aware of these amendments so that they can question it and challenge it.
If you will allow me, the amendments I referred to were done in 2018. It was an amendment to section 52 of the Principal Act, which is the Representation of the People Act. In those amendments, section 52 of the Principal Act was repealed and the following new section substituted. So it now reads, section 52, subsection 1. Subject to the provisions of section 51 and this section, no person shall be entitled to vote in any polling division unless his or her name appears on the official list of electors for that polling division. Subsection 2. Notwithstanding subsection 1, a person who has been nominated as a candidate for election in a constituency other than the constituency in which his or her name appears on the official list of electors may vote in any polling station in the constituency for which he or she has been nominated. So those amendments to section 52 of the Principal Act was made in 2018. The question is, why? And I'm asking this question as a citizen, a concerned citizen. Because if you look back in history, and again, we can go back to section 32, subsection 1, and I would love to engage and have more discussions with the populace about the interpretation of this, because it says each of the constituencies into which Grenada is divided in accordance with the provisions of section 56 of this constitution shall return one member. Discussion with my colleagues are saying, well, the constitution doesn't say that the individual has to be a member of the constituency. Then who or what is returning a member and where is that member being returned to? And you have to read the provisions as it is written and not as you believe it to be interpreted. So each constituency shall return a member. That member is to be returned to the House of Representatives, and that member shall be directly elected in a manner as may, subject to the provisions of this Constitution, be prescribed by or under any law. So the manner in which the member is to be elected has to be in accordance with the provisions of this Constitution. So the member, it comes from the constituency, is returned to the House of Representatives in a manner consistent with the provisions of the Constitution. That's how it's written. So I, in my humble opinion, cannot see any other interpretation. So the person has to be a member, and it's further backed up by clauses and sections within the Representation of the People Act, which states that at least six members of the said constituency must nominate the individual. And if you look at the form, as a member of the constituency, you are now swearing that the individual meets the prerequisites to represent you.
And that living in the
Living in the constituency.
12 months.
Yes.
So if I'm not living in the constituency for 12 months, I can't be nominated. That's what the constitution is saying, literally.
I cannot see any other interpretation.
Okay. Go ahead. I just ask a question.
Yes. So if one looks at the amendments made in 2018, we need to start asking ourselves as citizens whether or not the amendments are constitutional, because it now gives the authority to a candidate who doesn't live in the constituency to be nominated as our candidate. And it makes sense. If you look at the cultural context, wouldn't you want someone who is a member, who's familiar with the needs and the issues of the constituency to be your representative?
Yes.
So it's a discussion that we need to have, because on the ground, we are very much aware that a number of our MPs allegedly aren't living in the constituencies where they're representing. We are seeing individuals coming forward who are not members of the constituency, but are now caretaker candidates for the constituency. So it's a discussion that we're putting out there, hopefully to initiate a wider discourse on whether or not this is something that we want as a people.
So hold on. So I want to ask you a question here then, right? So if an election had to call to the next month, what you're saying that certain members who just moving into a constituency would not be qualified to run as a candidate because they have not been living in that constituency for 12 months?
If we agree that the various sections that we have been referring to articulated that we need to be in the constituency for 12 months. And as Cassandra's articulated earlier on, we need to read what is there, not what we have grown accustomed to.
Right.
What we want to think is there. What is in front of us that we read?
So in green,
it's clear. Section 30 is clear. Just as we understand very clearly that you have to be 18 years old to vote, and we accept that. Okay? It's clear. This says that you have to be a Commonwealth citizen, and you must attain the age of 18 years. That's clear. There's no ambiguity.
Right.
B says you have to reside in Grenada for a period of 12 months.
Does it say where in Grenada you reside? Anywhere in Grenada?
No, it does not.
Right. So then
No,
can I
it does not.
can I then decide to run in Ladig if I live in St. Andrews Northeast? I said, okay, I can run in Ladig because I've been in Korea for 12 months. I'm a Commonwealth citizen. I'm over 18 years old. Can I run in Ladig according to the Constitution?
Sections 32 addresses the issue of where you have to live, where you have to reside.
So within the okay, I want for public knowledge. So first of all, I must be a Commonwealth citizen living Grenada for 12 months. Now to run in a particular constituency, I must also reside in that same constituency for 12 months.
You have to be a member of the
constituency for 12 months. So I cannot live in Larry for 6 months and then move into St. David within the next 6 months. So 6 months doesn't qualify me to represent the people of St. David, Northeast, within a 6 months period after election been called.
So hold on. It says that it is subject to the provisions of this constitution and it can be prescribed by under any law. So the parliament, it allows now the parliament to make a law that can determine the period.
Okay.
Right? The period for which you must live in the constitution.
Okay. So given the present state of affairs, has there been a parliamentary amendment or law passed to allow that to happen, to say, okay, I could stay in the constitution for 6 months and be elected there? Is there any, are you aware of any law passed by Parliament to accommodate such?
Well, the amendments that Cassandra alluded to just a while ago actually allows the candidate who wants to run in a particular constituency to live outside of the constituency to be registered to vote in another polling division, but to allow him not only to run in the constituency that he wants to do, but also that he can vote in that constituency. So the question now becomes whether these amendments are according to the Constitution.
Okay, here's a question here for you from Lincoln Deputy. And for the phone line are open, you can call in to ask the question. The phone number is 437-980-7467. That's a WhatsApp call. I'm happy to accommodate you here. So Lincoln asking the question here, Cassandra and Dave. Let me see, where is it? Okay. Does the Constitution say what live in means? Live in means, does it say what a live-in means? Meaning living in a place morning, noon, and night, eating tea, breakfast, and dinner in that place. What if I have a fancy mansion in Lansapin and I visit that mansion once a month? That means is that recognized as living in Lansapin?
Okay, so what the Constitution allows is that the Parliament of the country can make laws to determine what living means.
Yes. So the Parliament can do that, not the Constitution.
The Parliament can make laws to determine, to prescribe by any law of Parliament, right? But that law must be subject to the constitutional provisions.
Okay.
And that is where it gets, so Parliament can make a law, but it must be subject
to the Constitution.
So Parliament can, for instance, say you have to live 6 months. They can say that you have to live a year. They can make a law for that.
Okay. Good enough.
But the Parliament cannot make a law, likewise, to change the age.
Okay.
That the Constitution prescribes as 18 years of age.
And if I may, Dave and Sheriff, the RPA further, let me try to pull it up here. I think what Lincoln is referring to is what the legislation refers to as ordinarily resident.
Resident.
So it said, for the purposes of registration under this act and the rules, a person is deemed subject to this act to reside in the polling division in which he was ordinarily resident immediately prior to his registration. A person is not ordinarily resident in a polling division if he has taken up residence in that polling division for the purpose of engaging in any employment of a temporary or seasonal character. It further states that for the purposes of registration under this act and the rules, a person may be ordinarily resident only in one polling division at any particular time.
Okay, so you
So
can,
yes, Lincoln, it's a good question and an observation that you made.
so then
So Lincoln wouldn't give up
Lansapin.
the Mansap, he wouldn't give up the wharf for the Lansapin mansion. Never happened.
All right, for the phone number is 237-980-7467. Please give us a call and let me hear from you as a WhatsApp call. All right, go ahead, Cassandra and Dave. I'm just facilitating here. So let's go.
And folks, thank you so much for the questions. The questions stimulate discussions, and every time we discuss these issues, it becomes clearer to us, and we hope that that is what is happening to you also. That when you partake in these discussions, you get a different sense of what a development process should be, because the Constitution contemplates that there are times that we have to elect people to govern us.
Mm-hmm.
But it also makes a provision that no one should know who you vote for.
Right.
Right. Sections 32, subsection 3 says that in the election of members of the House of Representatives, the votes shall be given by ballot in such manner as not to disclose how any particular person votes. So your vote is a personal, confidential, private. You don't have to share it with your wife. You don't have to share it with anybody.
Right.
Nobody should know who you vote for. Because what is contemplated is that for us to develop as a people, we have to come together despite whoever, even if we voted for different people. After that has happened, after that has ended, we have to come together and pool our resources for us to develop as a people. It will never happen with a partisan political agenda where parties are only they are consumed with remaining in office and preparing for the next general elections. And that's it.
Right. So let me be clear on something here. Someone asked a question. I made a statement, which is a kind of a question statement. So why some of our people who are out of the boundaries cast their votes inside the boundaries? They themselves are not residing, and this has been going on for a number of years, in my opinion. That's what she says here. That was Sonia Martin Scott. Can people really leave one? But if you suppose a registration in a constituency, you have to check your ID before you vote, right? So how people been doing that? How are they escaping the detection to vote in a constituency which they're not registered to vote in? Can someone move from one constituency to the other and vote in that constituency without detection? Or possibly?
It's interesting to note that in one of the public appearances by one of the representatives from the electoral office, he did admit that while the legislation mandates, because the word shall is used there, mandates for the presentation of your card on polling day, the voter registration card, that the last election, the presiding officers allowed individuals to vote without presenting their card.
Are you kidding me?
Yes, because I can attest publicly that when I went to vote, I was not asked for my card, though I had it on my person.
Hold on. So Toro could vote in the town of St. George's, and if he so desire, he listen the poll and he said to go to Parak to vote to boost the vote to get a candidate win. He could do that without nobody asking for ID card.
No, I don't know if he can do that, but that is why we are having this discussion. So we understand what the constitutional provisions say, what the legislation say, and to discuss whether the legislations are consistent with the constitutional provisions. And if there are any sections of the Constitution or of the legislations that we believe or can be looked at, then maybe we as a people can bring it to the attention of the supervisor of elections, who is ultimately responsible for the happenings in the electoral office. So I cannot speak to what Toro may or may not be able to do. I can only speak to what the constitutional provisions state and compare that to the legislation, the Principal Act, and the subsequent amendments made.
Wow. So hence we need to have more constitutional educational program going on, so people get more aware, and even the people who facilitate the election and the respective electoral offices will be more way to check to make sure that person is on the registration list, right? So they won't be having a person that is not supposed to be voting in product. Yes?
And it is interesting to note that I took the liberty to reach out to the electoral office, and what I found very interesting is that the individual I spoke with kept referring to the legislation, and I kept reverting back to the Constitution, because like I said to him, the electoral office is the core of our democracy. And while I understand the sections of the legislations that he was trying to bring to my attention, I also understand that at the end of the day, all of my concerns, all that has happened and is happening within the electoral office is the ultimate responsibility of the supervisor of elections. I asked around but I inquired when was the last time a report was tabled in Parliament as per the directives from the Constitution by a supervisor of elections. And I have not found one, and I've gone back thus far as 15 years, and I have not seen a report tabled by any supervisor of elections. And I'm raising this to say that because he or she is ultimately responsible for whatever happens within the electoral office, any amendments made to the Representation of the People Act, which is the legislation which governs the electoral process, should merge from that or any report. So I noted keen interest that there have not been any report, but I know that there have been concerns raised not only by the caucus, but by a grouping of civil society, by the main opposition entity, by citizens. I've seen articles written by citizens of Grenada raising concerns about the electoral process. And I would believe that once these issues are raised, that anyone in charge of the electoral office would take those concerns into consideration and even maybe initiate investigations into whether or not those concerns are valid. And I haven't found any report, and I find that very concerning as a citizen of Grenada.
Because my next question would be, how effective is the people who overseen the election in the respective polling stations? Then, because if they have if the supervisor of election have not given the person's response or charge responsibility to oversee voting in the different position to go, abide by certain guidelines, anyone could move into a constituency because of who they are and vote in a polling station because they're very savvy, they understand how the politics works, and they can move into a constituency the day of election and go and vote in a constituency without being detected. Therefore, having a result that does not really really reflect the will of the people. So how do we fix that? Should we then make sure that everybody voting, that should be standard procedure, that the people showing the ID must reside, the ID must show that they reside in the constituency to vote there?
While I agree that as citizens, we have a role to play to ensure that the voters list is clean, for lack of a better word. Again, I come back to the fact that the electoral office is cloaked with constitutional independence, and it should not be influenced by any individual or any entity. So as citizens, I want to put out a clarion call, because that's what the Constitution says, for us to ensure that the individuals who hold that position of supervisor of elections is independent. And of course, we can look at it in a realistic context. We can look at the current supervisor of elections, and we can go back years and draw our own conclusions. But as a people, I think that we have to ensure, because we are the ultimate authority, we have to ensure that the individuals who are in charge of the core of our democracy are independent individuals. Because again, I'm emphasizing that the electoral office is close with constitutional independence and should not be influenced by any individual or any entity.
Okay. I told just saying something here that make a lot of sense too. Luis, I'm not in Grenada, so I haven't been there for the last couple of elections. Well, do they finger ink stuff still in the polling station, or just go show your card and go and vote? How is this done? You have to dip your hand in.
My apologies for leaving you guys on a bit for a short.
Yeah, so you have to dip your hand in the ink, right? Okay, so then it's more difficult for me to move to another polling station to vote, because my hand is now stained with that ink. So that question of people voting in a constituency, how would they do that if they know if their hand is already stained with a vote?
If I may, Sheriff, I'm looking at a comment that Lincoln is making, indicating that these are just allegations. I mean, Dave can go back further than I can. Some years ago, when I think it was Gloria Payne Banfield, correct me if I'm wrong here, Sandra Ferguson and others who are part of civil society raised concerns about the electoral office in Carriacou, and I think it's the St. George's Northeast constituency, when Nazim Burke once contested, or twice. And the findings from these investigations did prove that there were some, what word can I use, misappropriations. Again, why no action was taken is beyond me. I cannot speak to that. But no, Mr. Lincoln Depredine, some of these things that all of these things that we are saying are not allegations. Over the years, civil society, the caucus and caucus members have had discussions with the current supervisor of elections and past supervisor of elections. We have made all of the discussions, the content of the meetings public. And to date, some of the concerns that we raised have not been answered satisfactorily. And these are genuine concerns. These are not allegations. Okay. These are facts. We pointed them to facts. And the current supervisor and past supervisors have not taken actions to investigate this and bring some closure to the concerns that we raised. I know they are not allegations. So they did admit that there were some happenings in the electoral office in Carriacou and in the constituency of St. George's Northeast, I think it was.
Those two constituencies there were
your mic, kind of deep into your mic, Mr. Ledcover. Yeah, the mic is buffering on us. Go ahead.
You hearing me now?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. You could, yeah. Go ahead.
The electoral process is filled with a number of provisions that are there to protect the integrity of the elections, and to make sure that the whole concept that one man and one vote is realized at the ending of the elections, and that it is in fact the will of the people that is being displayed when you choose a representative, and not a party, but when the constituency chooses a representative, it is the will of the constituent that this person shall be their representative. Again, the concept that we are voting for a leader comes to bear because it goes directly against what the Constitution says. The Constitution says that you are in fact voting for a representative. So at no point in time does the electorate in Grenada vote for a political leader. The political leader is chosen by the rest of the representatives. He is the person who commands the respect of the majority of the representatives in the House. And that is how you get the political leader. So all of those provisions in the Constitution have been so battered and bruised that we can no longer recognize them. And that is the conversation that we have to bring to the fore, because by our very own actions, or in some cases inactions, we are removing the protections that the Constitution has embedded in it. And what we are replacing it with cannot stand the test of time, does not, stand up to scrutiny. So for instance, Cassandra indicated that the office, the electoral office, is in fact independent. It is clothed with constitutional independence. And it is subject to the control of no person or no authority. Now, the Constitution only gives very special offices that kind of protection. So the supervisor of elections is a very powerful person. But what the Constitution also does is that it gives the supervisor of elections direction as to who his staff should staff, who he has to deal with. And it speaks to him dealing with his registration officers, etc. Now, interestingly, the JPs, Justices of the Peace, by an act in the RPA, by amendments to the RPA, are now allowed to verify Commonwealth citizens. That is something new, and it directly goes, head on with the duties of a registration officer. Because traditionally, the registration officer is the one who is spoken about in the Constitution. And the registration officer has the authority to investigate, to find out whether you're a Commonwealth citizen, and whether, if you are in fact a Commonwealth citizen, that you have satisfied the residency / domicile requirements. And that was the duty of the registration officer. We have now seen that justices of the peace, you can go to a justice of the peace and swear that you're a Commonwealth citizen. And the justice of the peace, he just accepts your oath.
Go check
There's
it.
no mechanism to verify, what you're saying, whether it is or it is not. The registration officer on the other side, his duty, he can go to your house and sit and make sure that you come home and you are where you say you are.
Okay.
And those are duties that are given to him by the Constitution. So we're seeing a lot of these amendments. And the question is whether the amendments satisfy the requirements put forward in the Constitution. All right. We know that in most cases, for instance, Springs Main Road, that's a very popular one. Springs Main Road, if you're to the stop of Springs Main Road, you're in one constituency. And if you're on the bottom side, you're in another constituency.
Oh.
So if I give my address as Springs Main Road. What does that mean?
Okay.
They need another mechanism to verify, to identify that you are in fact in the South and not in the other constituency. So to make an amendment that says if you give me a bill, a water bill or electricity bill, that can suffice. Begs the question whether the original intent that you be in a particular constituency, you have to be in a particular polling division, is satisfied. And I think that if we examine it, we see clearly that it's not.
Right. There are several statements here. Catherine, are you reading them?
Yeah, but just before you go on, Dave made mention of the documents that the electoral office is now requiring an elector to present when you're coming to register. It is also important to note that the legislation speaks to a citizen certificate. Yes. So I'm assuming, while I know there's been a lot of debate, and I am going to openly say that I haven't been able to peruse the citizen by investment legislations and their subsequent amendments, but I've heard that the CBI citizens can vote, but I've also heard that they can't. But I haven't been able to verify it as yet. But it is interesting to know that it's there in the legislation that one has to present your citizen certificate. So that is why I love having these discussions, because it shows where the law can sometimes contradict itself and legislations. Because while we speak about the Representation of the People Act, we know when you look at that particular clause, you now have to go look at the CBI Act to see, well, what is it that's going on? What really is a citizen certificate? So it's just something for us as citizens to think about. Because on the other side, they were saying to me, no, CBI citizens can't vote.
Right.
But this is what the legislation states.
So in regard to the irregularities, and Linka made several references here, and Margaret has made a statement, actually thorough, she making mention. I can vouch, yes, let me get this, for the non-resident voting. I personally know of someone who lives just a few blocks from me, from me in New York, who voted in Southeast, left here 4 days before the election and went to and voted. Right? I blame the party monitor for not knowing the constituent well enough to challenge those type of immediately, because as Toro say here, right, as I stated earlier, there are irregularities in every election everywhere, but how much do they impact the final outcome, right? So how much does those things reflect the final outcome? Well, it resulted in MP winning 15 seats. You know what I mean? Whoever saw it, people could vote for. It does make a difference. The Northeast constituency is one of those constituencies that was argued that was parried, and people come in and vote in those constituencies to make up the difference of the vote. So how do we really detect those? How do we, what system should be put in place? I think Hudson George made an observation that they should have the only thing that can happen unfairly in greater general election is voters party. As for independent person as supervisors, I don't see that in greater. Don't see that happening in greater. So how do we get independent people to really monitor the elections to ensure that those things will happen?
Well, the Constitution even provides for that.
Okay.
The Constitution makes it the provision that the supervisor of elections, the person who is charged with the office, must be a public officer. And interestingly, The buzzword around now is pension.
Mm.
Okay, there's this case that has just been, a judgment has just been passed on the case with regards to pensions.
Right.
And those of us who are in the public service, and you would consistently hear public servants saying, for me, I ain't losing my pension over that.
Mm.
And what that does, it gives a certain level of protection to make sure that that public officer will not engage in corrupt activities.
Mm.
Right? Because there's a recourse that you can lose your pension at the end of your tenure. Because every government worker, every public servant that's appointed by the Public Service Commission is entitled to a pension, a non-contributory pension, which is separate and distinct from a contributory pension. So it means that there is an arrangement where you get a small salary now, and once you work with me, and you toe the line and you don't do anything wrong, you don't steal, you don't whatever, you don't disrespect people, all of those things, take bribes, etc., etc. At the ending of the day, you will get the rest of your salary at that end. And that protects the service. But when we move away, and that is important because the supervisor of election is a public servant.
Right.
He's a permanent secretary. But we have assistant supervisors of elections, and those don't have the same qualification. So how do we control their action? So there is a system that has been designed to work a particular way. And sometimes you remove a bolt here, you remove a panel there, you remove another thing here, and you change, and then it doesn't work the same.
So so then in Dr. is saying here, okay, let me do Dr. and so Margaret is saying to Lincoln here, Lincoln Deputy, I think in our case where one or two people can make a difference in the outcome of well, I think I lost it. Okay, here.
I think Lincoln's concern is whether or not the concerns that we are raising, if they really can make a difference in the outcome of an elections in Grenada. Mr. Deputy, humbly, I believe they can. If you look back in our history, we have had situations where candidates have won or lost by 1 vote, 6 votes, 4 votes. So while it may seem insignificant in a small demographic like ours, these concerns are important. They are crucial. No, a candidate or candidates can lose or win by that 1 vote.
But Cassandra, this is pure allegation, not facts.
I was trying to pull up the report that came from the supervisor of elections on the Gloria Payne Banfield, where the office admitted to the irregularity. So they were not allegations. The Nazim Burke's constituency, I'm sorry, I just can't remember it off the top of my head, but the electoral office proved that there were some irregularities within that constituency as well. So, Mr. Deputy, they are not allegations. And I think for us, and for me, one of my concerns is if as citizens we are bringing this to the attention of the electoral office and the supervisor is ultimately responsible, it is his or her responsibility to do an investigation, initiate an investigation to ensure that what you are calling allegations are really not allegations, but that has not been happening.
So Cassandra, did you guys speak about, once I was off, did you speak about the websites that are purporting to register?
No. Yes, no? And that's something that maybe Mr. Deputy can maybe chime in on. some time ago, about 2.5, 3 years ago, a grouping of civil society brought to the attention of the electoral office some suspicious portals, websites where that was encouraging individuals to vote. I don't want to use citizens, individuals to register to vote. We did bring it to the attention of the supervisor of elections, because as far as we understand, the electoral office is solely responsible for the website, and they admitted that yes, that's true, which is, I think, is www.peogrenada.org. But there are other websites that gave links and encouraging people to upload the required documents and promising that they will get their voter registration card in 2 weeks and things like that. So no, and these are not allegations again, Mr. Deputy. We brought it to the attention of the electoral office. The portals encouraging individuals to register, upload your documents on the website, and you will, once the documents are uploaded, then you will receive a voter registration card in 2 or 3 weeks.
So Cassandra, Bernard, can we got party that feel that they've been left out and lost because of that? Couldn't they challenge that in court? Did you have the evidence from the electoral office?
Of course. There are 2 levels of challenges you can make. You can make challenges about the process and the laws that are passed by Parliament to the representation of the People's Act. Or if you think that a constitutional provision has been violated, then you can access the court.
Okay.
So there is recourse. Nobody has done it before. In most cases, people tend to look at what goes on with regard to the representation of the People's Act. But we have to remember that whatever the Act says, it is always subject to the Constitution. And if, for instance, a simple violation like the age requirement that is prescribed in the Constitution, if that is done, then of course you can challenge it.
Okay.
Of course you can challenge it. And just to get an idea of the kind of amendments that can be made, it is now legal for your landlord to certify that you live in a prescribed area and that you're renting from him.
Okay.
So your landlord can certify to the registration officer by letter, whatever, that you live in the constituency. Now, interestingly, that was the duty of the registration officer, to go to the landlord's house to see the apartment and to verify that the elector is in fact living in that area where he says. Now listen to where it gets complicated. We have apartments in the south with 50 apartments, 70 apartments. Now, if you average 2 or 3 people per apartment, 70 apartments can have 210 people. And the landlord has the authority to say that 210 people now live in a particular polling division. I mean, hello? And we have these apartment buildings going up, right next to each other.
Wow.
So those are the realities. And the amendments that are being made are seemingly taking away those protections instead of adding to them. Removing the protections.
Wow. So how do you fix? Then how do we fix that in essence?
Well, the decision has to be whether these amendments are in fact satisfying the constitutional requirement, can pass the constitutional litmus test. And that would have to be challenged, I guess, in a court.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Sandra. You guys, I'm just here. Go ahead. Any questions on before the flow
Well,
going?
I was just going to provide some facts for Mr. Depredine, since he loves facts as relates to the websites that we brought to the attention of the Electoral Office. The one of the portals was gov.gd / register-vote. It opened to a page titled Register to Vote, which advises citizens of Grenada to register to vote. The page further lists the prerequisites and the process to register, including the uploading of the digital copies of the documents listed on the website. The site then states that information was published on November 19th, 2019, and updated on January 11, 2020. It provides a contact information, address, telephone numbers, and email address for the PEO, but does not provide a website. It intimates that after submitting your digital copies of the documents, you can visit the office with your original documents for review before receiving the card. The other portal, which was www.gov.gd/PEO/registration, opens to a page which repeats the information on the PEO's official website and guides the registrant to visit the office with copies of the relevant documents, answer the relevant questions posed by the officer, produce fingerprints and signature, after which the card can be collected 2 weeks later. Another portal, www.infinitygrenada.com/voters-registration-card, describes itself as a licensed company, which is a local and escrow agent and international business services operation specializing in immigration programs, post-immigration services, and corporate and international business services, unquote. This site instructions mirrors that of the www.gov.gd register-vote, and the only thing that's different though is that the website speaks about the issuance of the card following 2 weeks after the process. The voter's registration card will be ready. The applicant may be contacted by telephone to collect the card when it's ready, or the applicant can collect his or her card, which is delivered upon signature. The initial card is free, and it states that there is a replacement cost of $20 EC, and the process on this particular website is 3 to 6 months. Wow. According to the information provided, the issuance of voter card takes a period of 2 weeks from initial application. So what process is this website that I'm saying is going to take 3 to 6 months? And we ask the question, is it the process of purchasing citizenship? The representatives from the Electoral Office continue to publicly emphasize that the only web portal that they're responsible for is the PEOGrenada.org. But yet we have other portals encouraging individuals to register and promising a voter registration card. So, Mr. Depredine, these are not allegations, these are facts that was presented to the Supervisor of Elections and the Electoral Office, and to date, nothing was done. In my opinion, and I need to separate my opinion from that of the Hatsai Way, if information like this comes to the office, isn't it the responsibility of the Supervisor of Election to initiate an investigation? Leaving it there.
Well, to top what Cassandra is just advising us on Section 35 of the Constitution. And again, going back to the Constitution, Section 35 of the Constitution, and the topic, Supervisor of Election. It says here, subsection 1, there shall be a Supervisor of Election whose duty it shall be to exercise general supervision over the registration of voters in elections of the members of the House of Representatives and over the conduct of such elections. So maybe I should just read it again. There shall be a supervisor of elections whose duty it shall be to exercise general supervision over the registration of voters in elections of the House of members of the House of Representatives and over the conduct of such elections. He's the boss. Those matters were referred to him, and to date we had no action.
You're depending on, I can't hear you. Yeah.
And we have to understand that we have to take that in the context that in 2012 a component of the electoral office went missing.
Why?
And that has not been found. And it's not been found, and we don't know that case has been closed, or what is the status of the case.
Wow. So in this case, how do you go about fishing out that from where it is? What would be taken, what should be done to ensure that this is taken care of?
So clearly there needs to be an investigation. Because his job and there in the Constitution is, he has to exercise general supervision. He is the supervisor.
Okay.
It is his charge.
Okay, guys. I know you're 10 minutes to 11 o'clock. I know Cassandra may have to do some domestic work there at the parenting. Yeah, Cassandra?
Oh yes, but this is a discussion that I love having. Like many of you, I would love the answer to some of the concerns that we have raised. And for me, I am not afraid of being wrong, quote unquote. If the concerns are not warranted, if they're invalid, all we're asking for is our investigations into them and to kind of give an update, a status update, whether or not this investigation is closed, and these are the findings.
There is some by Hudson George, I think that directly to Mr. Dave Ned. I think you are focusing on urban voters, but if the tenants have telephone bills paid in their name with their address on the bills, right, there is no problem. That was a statement from Mr. George. I don't
representation of it.
I don't everyone, does that make a difference? I know Hudson talk about it, you talk more focused on urban.
There are apartment buildings all over Grenada.
All right.
In the town of St. George, in particular in the south, there may be a concentration of apartment buildings there.
Right.
But we have to understand that there are fundamental rights associated with voting. And if you say to me that if I don't have water in my house that I'm paying a bill for, I can't vote, there's something wrong with that. Why do I need to have a water bill or a telephone bill? Who says that I'm supposed to have that? There's no law saying that.
Okay.
Laws must be applied across the board.
Right, I agree.
Me not having a water bill, me not having an electric bill, does not make me any less equal to you. I still have a right to vote. So that cannot be a requirement of the process because it disenfranchises me.
I think what said referring to an American style that you to do anything, most places to prove residency, in most cases you have to have a bill of some kind that's that you live in address and stuff like that. I think that is more of our North American standard. That is
there's a national registry
mm.
and there's a voters registry.
Could you explain
And
the
the two, and the two are distinctively different.
Yeah.
The voters registry concentrates on the constituency where you live. They must pinpoint that because you are electing a representative for your constituency.
Mm.
It focuses on that. And there must be a mechanism to verify that you are in fact in that constituency.
Mm.
We have discussed this, and I think we have agreed that merely having a bill, a water bill, or a light bill in your name does not satisfy them, especially in areas along the borders of constituencies. It does not satisfy.
So Mr. Toro is asking, before I go to Toro, next question here, Toro making a point to you, Mr. Ned. Yes, indeed, Miss. Okay, let's use Cassandra. And I'll come on to Toro with you. Toro says here, Mr. Lincoln, I recruit from Mr. Lincoln, deputy. Yes, indeed, Ms. Mitchell. Give us facts. Does the electoral office know who he was responsible for the portal? Wouldn't the electoral office know if documents arrive at its office that it doesn't process or issue? As for Cassandra, I don't know if Cassandra. No, I think she answered it here. The Parliamentary Electoral Office representative intimated that they are responsible for the official site only. The latter part of your question, I need the answers to. Okay, so that settled that question already. What would you use, Mr. Ned, to verify where someone lives, apart from the bills that they pay? What other verification?
The duty of verification, up until the amendments that were made within the last 4 or 5 years, rest with the registration officer and by extension the supervisor.
Okay.
And they had the authority to verify. Okay. As a matter of fact, we have a system where there was an enumeration, where there was a snapshot of what the electorate was. And the enumerators would go into the field during a period, 6 months, 1 year, whatever it is, and they would speak to everybody, and they would verify, and they would give you a certificate, an enumeration certificate, right? Because there was a verification process. Now, we are allowing individuals to take that to verify those documents. Any individual,
okay,
who is a landlord can say that people live here. And what does live here mean? Because for the landlord, living here means that you're paying me a rent.
Right.
It does not necessarily mean that you come there every day or twice a week or whatever. You rented an apartment from me and I collect money from you every month.
You see how complicated that could be? So I could be paying rent and the wharf, and then
living in Lansabine.
Lansabine, does that guarantee a vote in Lansabine or a vote in the wharf? So it's in the center of St. George's, in town of St. George's. So how do you fix such a dilemma?
You have to remember that we want to make these discussions factual. These are the facts. And as mature individuals, we have to now come up and say whether we want, this is what we want our democracy to look like.
Mm.
Or if there is another something that we looking for.
Right.
The elections, the electoral office is central to our democracy. It ensures that one man votes once. And that is where the will of the people comes from. That one man, one vote. And if there's anything that puts that process, in doubt, then, every effort has to be made to address it.
Right. Sandra?
So if there are websites purporting to register people, as supervisor, you are charged with the process of registration. You can't say that my website is this or my website is that. The evidence is in front of you.
Okay, Sandra, go ahead. Sandra.
Well, I want to kind of touch on something that Mr. Defreding is saying, that this is 2022 and we need to be more scientific. I agree. But scientific could also include where the registration officer has a device with all of the information. He or she goes into the community and the information is there on the device and they verify the information. So they don't have to, it doesn't have to be a time-consuming process where you're writing it on a paper and then have to go back and file it on some other paper or notebook, as we have seen in the past. So being scientific can still include them going out in the field. Come on, it's only like 109,000, 12,000 people. So I still support going out there. I think, and maybe it's also something that can initiate discussion among the populace. What can we use? Are we satisfied with the process? So yes, I agree with you that we can be more scientific, but I think that the process as it is slightly flawed. I also want to touch on the right to vote. I hear people saying this, like if it's a God-given right or a right enshrined in the Constitution of Grenada in Chapter 1, I beg to point to the legislation which governs the electoral process and voting, which says that your right to vote is according to the provisions of this Constitution and even the legislation. If you look at the Constitution, there are instances where your right to vote can be taken away. So maybe that's something we can have on another program, but not because you are a Grenadian citizen means that you have the right to vote, that you can just vote anytime. There are instances where that right, like most of our rights, can be derogated. So that's something that maybe we can leave another discussion for another program.
Mr. Deputy, addressing that in one sense here, but he says that, okay, the referendum proposed a change from the supervisor of election to the parliamentary electoral office, PEO, to a more robust boundaries commission. And we said, nah, we voted down. We have to make up, we mind what we want. And, I've heard that challenge before. And a lot of times when, in that particular case, to referring to, persons may argue that there are certain things in that section that they don't want to vote for, that is put into that section. So if you vote for one, you vote for all, and that is not what they want. So that have to be those things have to be revised and fine-tuned to get the I think that's one of the reasons why the vote wasn't passed too, because there's things that were put in on a certain section in the referendum that people was not agreeing to. So they put things that they want and they put things that they know people like, but then at the same time people say, hey, I am voting for that because this is in there. If I vote for one, I vote for all. I'm not condoning those kind of behaviors. I'm not going to support this under that. put them individually, probably put them by itself, stand alone, and people could vote for what they want in the constitution, and say, look, we don't want that. Let's just strike down this one. How can we do that then? If we want that change that we're asking for.
What we found in the referendum, both referenda, 2016 and 2018, was that the amendments to all of the bills, every bill, give Parliament / the executive more authority than they had before
Right.
the referendum. If the bills were passed, the executive authority would have become more empowered, and by extension, the people will have less power. And that is so across the 6 bills that were proffered. And I don't think that I think that that there is sufficient literature out there now that these bills have been analyzed. And one that I remember clearly, the change of name of state bill. It was said that, you know, we should include Karakou and Pitimatni, and that was it. But the amendment included a clause that says areas that that the Parliament now had jurisdiction to say to what the boundaries of Grenada were. Right? All we were doing is changing the thing from Grenada to Grenada, Karakou, and Pitimatni.
Right.
But they introduced public islands into the definition.
Right.
And if you introduce public islands into a definition, it means by extension that they are private islands also.
Yes. So which means that people and points and what do you call this? Outside of Sugarloaf.
The private islands of
yeah. Could be left out, right?
Exactly. And every one of those bills had those ambiguities. And I remember a prominent constitutional lawyer giving us a handle for it, and he called them red herring. So
right.
They're riddled with herring. A lot of them are.
I want to piggyback on something that Lincoln Deputy is saying here, and I think I had this discussion this week with a friend of mine, and he says, and by the way, no matter what system we put in place, any individual or party wants to win in an election must do the work and convince enough voters to vote for them and not for the other fella or girl. So no matter how many times Dave runs against me on the wharf, I will get more vote than him and will emerge the winner. I want to say something here because we have an election coming up soon. Yes? And I had this discussion. As much as we have this new so-called messiah of Grenada, right? People see him as the savior of the new party that will be changing Grenada, make things different. And all the accolades going around Mr. Deacon Mitchell and so on, all that is fine, right? But the little things that is happening in the villages, how engaging are the party in towing the line, meeting the people one-on-one and making things happen, giving them tangible things now than wait until they get into power. Because the incumbent will do the things that they know will win them votes. Yeah? We'll be fixing the pipe, putting the toilet, giving the board, giving that. And they say, look, when the time for election comes, they'll say, this is what I have done for you. I guarantee I'll continue doing this for you. But what have I done? What have these people done for you lately? Have they shown anything that they could do for you? They're just talking about what they would do when they get in. What are they doing now? They're not in the office. You don't have to wait in the office to do things. Right? And so we don't have the money to do because we're not in the office. Well, is it mismanagement or what? So people will question those things. So for a total to continue win on the wharf, you probably giving people like a fishing boat. Hey, I'll put gas in your, I'll give you gas.
A
You know?
I prefer to run against Torin Tanti fast. Yeah.
To you hear that? You between the path. You run faster than you. I'm afraid that you guys are trying to intellectualize the process of general election. I don't think so. I don't know if Cassidy want to answer, Mr. David want to answer that. They're the constitutional professionals here. Hudson George is saying, I am afraid that you guys are trying to intellectualize the process of general election. There's a constitution, Hudson George. And if you think it's intellectualizing, the talk is about the constitution and how elections should be held and what should be done, the process. So if you want to consider intellectualizing, I don't know, Mr. Davenet or Cassandra, you want to address that?
Well, I I have two comments to make. I think Hudson is inferring that the current process is not intellectualized. Is that what you're saying? And I think it's a good thing because if we are just reading what the Constitution as it is written states, so it means that we have a darn good Constitution.
Mm.
What say you, Hudson?
Let's take a call, 437-980-7467. Again, 437-980-7467. That's the number to call. Cassandra, waiting for you to call.
You know, this discussion is one that we must be having in every rum shop, in every sports bar, in every, all little institutions, in the schools, all over. Because the Constitution is just the rules that we agree to, adhere to. And I think people, we need to discuss those rules. If we have to change them, we come and we meet and we say, well, okay, this has to change. And that has changed. Because elections are not just for elections. Elections have a purpose. And the purpose is to ensure that we have some sort of a democratic representation. That we are all equal and that all our voices will be heard, no matter what it is. So that is why we're having an election, so that we can elect people to manage our affairs. Elections are not just because you want to get up and spend a lot of money and all of that. There's a purpose. And the purpose is that we have to develop as a country. And for us to develop, we are saying that this is the best group to manage our affairs. That's all it is.
Mr. Ned, Hudson is making a reference to something you said here. And he said that, let me see if I read up on top here instead of down, trying to go down there. Hudson is making the point as regarding the private islands. And I think you probably misunderstand what you're trying to get at. He said, Dave Ned, your argument about private islands is irrelevant. Some of the islands owned in Grenadines have active farmlands where citizens pay taxes for the land and property. But I think you misunderstand the concept of when you're referring to private islands, meaning that foreign private owners owning the lands. I think that's what help me here if I'm reading what you said wrong.
Whilst they're islands, Grenada, all the islands surrounding Grenada are under the jurisdiction of the government of Grenada, and the laws and regulations apply on all of the islands. So if you go to Isle of Kai, you go to Hog Island, they all under the jurisdiction of Grenada. Now, included in the bill was the concept that they were public islands. The bill stated that you were to change the name of state from Grenada, the definition of the name of state.
Hello, good night.
Hold on. I think I have it.
Hello? Yes.
Just trying to bring it up. But I don't know if you remember me saying earlier on that
Hold on, Hudson.
bills actually gave more authority to the parliament of the country.
Yeah.
And the change of name of state included these words, right? Such areas as may be declared by act of parliament to form part of the territory of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Mac. So that was added on to the definition of Grenada.
All right. Dave, we have a caller. Caller, go ahead.
Yeah, man, you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
I think a lot of Grenadians have the wrong perception or the wrong idea of lands owned in the state of Grenada. It is not connected to the mainland of Grenada or Carriacou or Petit-Mac. Now, there are people are from St. Patrick. There are people in my village, Hermitage, who own land property on Island. They pay taxes in Sotel. There are people who live on the island of Island farming, and they vote in St. Patrick's East. So, this thing where they've not talking about private island. There is no private island in Grenada once the tenants on those islands are paying taxes. We have the wrong perception of things. There are islands, John, you live in Toronto. There are people living on Center Island, Toronto. That is outside the harbor.
Yes.
From Toronto.
But Hudson, the island are not privatized by one owner. It's still a state city owned.
No, what I'm saying is that we have the wrong idea of things. We think that if somebody, a citizen of Grenada, own an island, we think the island is his. It's not his. He just happens to own land on that island that is not connected to the mainland or not connected to Carriacou or Petit-Mac. But the island is Grenada. The point again, if you go to Vancouver, there is an island in Vancouver called Vancouver Island on a river.
Yeah, but let's think of Grenada. Let's consider Grenada. What does but in the context of Grenada, what does a private island mean in the context of Grenada? Compared to
nobody in Ireland, nobody in Grenada own a private island that is the state of Grenada property. You might own the land, but you don't own a private island.
All right, let me hear what Mr. Dave, let's hear what Dave Neal have to say, or Cassandra. As we
were speaking about the referendum, and we were speaking about the proposed bill to change the name of state of Grenada from Grenada to Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Mac.
Hold on.
It was in that context that I made the that I spoke a while ago. And the bill, now it has nothing to do with me. The bill that was presented spoke about public islands. So the definition of Grenada was going to be changed, and it was to include, and let me see if I can find it here. Grenada as the state comprised 3 public islands, which are Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Mac. That was in the explanatory memorandum of the bill. Now, the question that was asked is if the bill defines 3 public islands, Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Martinique. What happens to the others? And there's several of them. There's Fog Island, there's Calavini Island, there's Isla Kai, etc., etc. Sandy Island, all of those islands. What happens to them in terms of whether they are now public or private? The bill defined that, not Dave Ned. And it is in that context we now speak it. Right? And I'm saying, and it was to say that all of the bills conveyed more authority to the parliament if they were passed than the parliament or the executive authority.
Okay, Hudson, does that answer your question now? Or you want more explanation?
No.
Okay,
No.
okay, you can turn off your radio. You turn off your radio.
Okay.
Hudson, turn off your radio. I'm getting a feedback.
Yeah. You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
The point Ned is making.
No, the Constitution is making.
No, but he is
That was the amendments, the referendum.
things.
That was the proposed bill for the referendum to change the name of state.
Carriacou has a population, pretty much think about a population with what you call, you have courthouse, you have churches, you have schools, you have all the basic necessities that make up part of a society. The other islands, what is the mistake Mr. Nedam is making? The other islands are not populated with schools, churches, with a registry. I mean, the basic thing that make up a community. So if you understand urban planning, his argument is wrong. If one day, Isla Roon happen to have a school, then the government could say, okay, Isla Roon have a school, the population grow, we're going to put a police station, we're going to put a medical station, and other, etc., etc. And then you could include it as a new part of Grenada where people live. But for the meantime, these places are just places people farm on the state of Grenada.
So Hudson, what happens if Bill Gates want to buy Calavini Island and exit from Grenada? What would you say?
You can buy the land.
No, answer a question. Listen carefully. If Bill Gates buy Calavini Island and want to annex it from Grenada,
he cannot buy the island. He can buy the land on the island. You see again, we just exaggerate things.
The island,
No.
the island, land on the island. What is the difference?
Listen. You cannot sell an island of Grenada. The mistake we make, we're trying to fool people.
Mm.
Any land in the state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Martinique, in the range of 200 miles out in the ocean, belongs to the state of Grenada. You don't have to study international law of the sea to know that.
Mm.
So when people talk in the thing, I just laugh. It's not in international waters. So you can buy an island in Grenada. You can buy the land on the island. This is why Grenadians were able to challenge Mr. Cohen and say, the pitch is mine. Okay. I'm too old to be fooled.
Okay.
I'm Sheriff. If I may, I think Hudson is still misunderstanding what Mr. Ned said. He was making reference to one of the bills presented in one of our referendum.
Yes.
And he was given the definition as per the bill, not as Dave Ned's definition. That's what the bill stated.
Exactly. Another time, is what the bill said, right? And the definition of what the bill defined in it as an island. All right, moving on. Thank you very much for your call, Hudson Judge. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Yes.
Thank you, Hudson George. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, moving on, Dave. Go ahead.
You gotta get Toro to call in, man.
Toro go call in. Toro does that. I think Toro owe me a roti for tonight, you know. I think.
You gotta get Toro to call in.
Yeah, I think Toro.
But you know,
Go
as
ahead.
Cassandra says, it is the bill that was presented to the people to vote. And that is what I was referring to. And
Yes.
I was referring to the concerns that were expressed by members of civil society, etc., with the inclusion of the word public island. Because the truth of the fact is that as he spoke to the international law, the public has access to all the other islands.
Yeah.
Because we have access to our beaches.
Right.
Right? And the beaches are part of the island. So the island, so what was happening is that if you defined Carriacou, Grenada, and Petit Martinique as public, what do you define the rest as?
Yes. So in a private place, I mean, I have to get permission from the owner of the land then not to go on it. Yes? So it
the island are in fact private.
Right.
So that is what we were pointing out.
Yes.
There was a discrepancy. And when they used the word
private and private, yes.
And Petit Martinique, it then begged the question, what were the other islands, whether they were public or not, and whether the public can access those islands.
Okay, I think I missed a call from somebody here. Caller, can you? That is, I think I missed a call from somebody. Let me see. If I missed the call. He said the Hudson Judge. Okay. All right. No missed call. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
Yes, so you know, I am absolutely enjoying the discussion this evening. You know, it's good to be back. You know?
Yes. Yeah, most definitely.
Delbert, though.
Oh, Delbert was not on tonight. Actually, this night is given. My regular Friday night has been based on my Cassandra and I agreement that I will give up that Friday night for you guys to use on a Friday night, and I do my talk show on Saturday instead. So that night is reserved for you and Cassandra to do for the caucus purposes. Yes. So every Friday night there'll be a spot. You and Cassandra and whoever is from the caucus want to be on that show is welcome. And Cassandra will be running things. You and Cassandra will be running this show.
Maybe we can give an official invite to Mr. Depredin.
Yes.
Come on, have a discussion.
Yeah, we want to put him on the panel.
Your show, invite who you wish to bring on the panel. You could do that.
You want to put him on the panel?
Just let me know in time so I can make the posters to put out. The pictures and everything, so who could be on the panel and stuff like that. You know, 2 or 3 at least, and then I can put the names, what pictures I want to put. I can put the names and put you on Dave and the rest of people's names. Like they have put pictures they want to send in, so we can do that and make a posters for the next week. Yeah. So yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Oh, Mr. Lincoln said, afraid to get some part. Dave and Cassandra at this moment are watching a big hockey game now. That's interesting that, see, that's something what we could do, multitask at the same time. You watch the hockey game and he's still tuning into the Gemfm show with the Cassandra and Dave Ned. That's why I get a round of applause for that. I love that. And we have Margaret there too as well. So Margaret and Hudson, hey, you know what? You guys could invite whoever you want on your show. You know what I mean? That show is you guys. So whoever you want to bring on your show on a Friday night, bring them on. Politicians, whoever, civil society personnel, just invite them to come on your show. You have a right to do that now. That's your show. So yeah, you own it.
Nobody could have Sampad. Sampad would have school anyhow.
Yes. So yeah.
But you know, central to this discussion is that yes, the Constitution reflects the rules that we have now, but the Constitution allows us to change those rules. And that is what we have to deal with. That is what we have to address. So instead of breaking the rules, right? Instead of us breaking the rules, deliberately you break the rules, you violate the rules, and young people grow up seeing you doing it, and they do the same thing. Let's change the rules. If the rules are not what we want now, let's change it. And the Constitution provides for that.
Let me ask you guys a question. In regards to the recent ruling of the pension plan, I want to play something, and I hoping that we have half an hour to go. Okay, let me play this, and that was from a popular politician, Mr. Michael Baptiste, made a claim here. I want to just off the grid here, able to decipher if you guys could have anything to say in regards to that. Let me see where I have it here. Okay, here is it. I'll play it for you to hear.
You know, this court ruling cannot be celebrated by either yellow or green because it was a conspiracy with the two parties. When Bishop overthrew the government, he suspended the Constitution. And he do away with the pension and gratuity that was in the law, in a 1957 law, as a result of the great battle that took place in Latin Junction, where scores of Grenadian workers lost their life. Agatha Fraser, Duncan, and others fighting the British regiment. Because in 57, Uncle Gary piloted that bill. He said, never again shall Grenadian blood be shed fighting for their rights. And what he did, it became a local law. And when we got independence in 74, in 71 in Marlborough House, when they were drafting the Constitution, he installed it in the Constitution. And here's what he did to protect workers and workers' rights. He said only the people could change that with a 2/3 majority. NDC, Bishop came in, he couldn't deal with it. He suspended the Constitution. NNP/NDC came in 85, and they tried to legitimize what was illegally done by Bishop. And they not only did that, they create a third pension scheme. That one is for politicians to get a pension and a gratuity after 2 terms. And since 1985, NNP and NDC have been trying to reform this Constitution without success. Both parties, NNP and NDC, when you listen to them, they tell you, yes, they want Constitution reform because they want to remove that law from the Constitution. They want to remove the part that place a worker on the Public Service Commission. They can't celebrate. Only we could celebrate because we have been saying so since 1979. We have been saying that Maurice Bishop was anti-worker. He suspended the Constitution, gave him the opportunity to introduce those repressive laws there. And he said NIS. What is NIS? NIS came from the Providence Fund. Another piece of legislation that was introduced by Uncle Gary in 69. Bishop changed the name and he called it NIS. And he said that all workers will now get benefits from NIS. Come on, my dear sister. Those are the facts. But you see, we keep dancing around our history. We're dancing around our history. We are not teaching our children the history of Grenada for fear that they would know the truth and they would toss aside those deceptive politicians. Why do we now have to celebrate for something that our foreparents died in Lawton Junction in March 51, fighting? It was a social revolution, social and economic justice. That is what the revolution was all about. So that people would no longer be slaves. So that when women get pregnant, they could go home and get maternity leave. And when you reach your golden age, you'd get a pension and a gratuity equal to that of your pay. That was there. The people who work under Uncle Gary from prior to 1979, they're home now enjoying a full pension. Those who came in under Bishop NNP, NDC, they're retiring in poverty. Those are the facts.
All right, that was Mr. Michael Matisse. Cassandra, what are your thoughts?
Well, I share similar sentiments. Yes, I congratulate the trade unions for the quote unquote victory. I was never worried about the outcome of this court case. The pension rights issues is enshrined in the Grenada Constitution, but I've stated publicly that this issue should not be polarized. This is not a partisan issue. And I've also highlighted the fact, just like he did, that both major political parties had opportunities to address and resolve the issue. And only now, as the issue brought before the judiciary, has it been resolved. So this is not anything for any one of the political parties to be celebrating or laughing about in some cases. So, and I don't see, I'm hearing in the public domain that there are allegations that individuals within the government side are indicating that the decision will be appealed. And I'm really curious to know on what grounds. So yes, I don't like the polarization, and I do congratulate. I think it's a victory for all workers, past, present, and future, that the court has made this decision. And I encourage others listening in to not polarize and make this a partisan issue.
Right. Evening.
There's an express provision in our preamble that says it reiterates that the ideal of free men enjoying freedom from want and fear can best be achieved if conditions are created whereby everyone may enjoy his economic, social and political, civil and cultural rights. So the duty of our government is to provide that kind of security for us. So pension should be a normal aspect of that somebody has to retire. So when, especially public servants, when an express provision in the Constitution is violated, then every Grenadian, it is not something that the unions alone can settle. It's not something that government alone can settle. There has to be a conversation with the stakeholders. We have to have a national conversation on the issue of pension. And first and foremost, we have to see why pensions are necessary, if it is necessary, and then what sacrifices we're prepared to make to ensure that those who are supposed to get their pensions get their pension. Because he's made an undisputed fact that Grenadians are retiring into poverty. And that is a fact. Because we have not been able to put away that nest for the days when we are no longer working. And the burden of paying pensions will be placed squarely on the shoulders of our youth. So those are discussions that we have to have. We have to prepare them for that.
So the NIS came in 1983, April of 1983, right? We were preparing for people now, for the young people who then work from that time to now, who should be retired or should be getting the pension, not so? Because they will have enough money in the coffers for them to retire upon, right? People before that, pre-79, pre-83, would have been able to be receiving their pension as under the old. But those people who joined in thereafter, the young people at age 19, 20, who started working in April of 1983, would have been able to enjoy the benefits of the NIS payments, yes, at this time. So,
but we have to differentiate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, we have to differentiate between the NIS, which is a contributory pension, meaning that you get paid your salary, and then you take a part of that salary and contribute to it. The pension. The pension that is provided to public workers and non-contributory. The government establishes the pension for them, and they don't have to make a contribution. So there is a distinct difference in the two pensions. And as I mentioned earlier, the government pension has a lot to do with how the rules and statutes and regulations, etc., of how the ministry operates, for instance. Like the Public Service Commission. It's a Public Service Commission. Pension is not a right. The pension can be taken away from you. It can be taken away from you for various reasons. It can be taken away because you're disciplined. So that was the kind of leverage that the Public Service Commission had with respect to government workers. So it's an integral part of the structure, the operations of the Constitution, the delivery of the government services to the citizenry. Pensions is an integral part of that. Because we know that traditionally government workers, their salaries are smaller. So you go to work in the bank, you start at X amount, whereas if you go to work in the government office, much smaller. The difference is at the ending of your period in the bank, you get a pension. If there is, you get a pension that you have contributed to. You have to make a contribution to that pension. When you finish with the public service, you get a pension, but you don't contribute to it. There's no deduction from your salary.
I the number of things that Mike said there, and I think Margaret had cut onto it, that Gary had maternity leave for women. I never knew that. That's something new to me. A number of things he said there is incorrect, and really not factual. Anybody, anywhere thinking, well taught or Gradient would know. I'm going to forget Bernard here on the show, who even pointed out that yes, NIS was first given was suggested to Gary, and he didn't want to do it because he didn't have enough people. Unemployment was so high that he didn't want to take it on. The PRG came in, and the brother from Ghana came back with the same idea again, and the PRG embraced it because at that time they had more people working in a household, so they can afford to introduce the NIS. Yes. So when Michael Batley is making the allegation that the PRG bright was from the something, whatever you call it, fund, it wasn't from any fund. It's a new season that was set up to run a national insurance scheme. And it was first introduced to Gary and he refused to use it to go along with it. The PRG came in and introduced it. So again, it called about vision and planning and Gary had no central planning. The PRG had that and we're lacking that today. So a number of things that he said really was not factual, and I had to have a discussion with him today and he didn't reply to the last set of questions and last statement I made anyway. So I guess he just couldn't have a rebuttal for that. So that didn't happen. Yes, Margaret, he did say it. He did make the point that Uncle Gary, he has to be out of his cotton picking mind for sure. Margaret, two things PRG did for sure was free secondary education and paid maternity leave. Nobody can disclaim or deny that. To tell Michael to will and come again. And even to pension and gratuity, got something with your salary. All right. So the time is now 11:41. Almost winding down yet. I think Cassandra may have to take her exit. Mr. Ned, how about you? Is your show, your guys' show? If you don't want to edit now, we can do it and get ready for next week, Friday night. Yes? Cassandra?
If there's anybody in the group, in the comment section who wants to suggest a topic, feel free to make suggestions.
Hold on, you speak up in the mic. When you bow down, we don't hear you. When you keep your head up and talk straight, we hear better.
Okay. I was saying that if there's anybody in the group who wants to make a suggestion with respect to what the discussion, how the discussion should look, the next time we meet, feel free to do so.
Right.
And if you pass the topics on to us, we can see how we can.
Okay, so the number is there. My email is gemfm.ca@gmail.com. The phone number is there. You can WhatsApp me or text me and let me know what topic you want to discuss with the Constitutional Commission, Caucus, Cassandra, and Dave Ned. If anything that you want to talk about election and constitution and legality in Grenada, feel free to send it to gemfm.ca@gmail.com so we can pass the questions on to them so we can make it a subject of discussion for the next show. The next show is next Friday night. I think it'll be 9 or 8. We'll give you details. We'll see the poster up anyways once we finalize the actual time when we come on. All right. So
and John, we want the commenters to feel free to challenge anything that we say.
yes. Talk to them. Go ahead.
This is a discussion, and feel free to challenge, everything and anything that we say. We're going to do our best to defend whatever it is. And we hope that discussion will allow for both of us, to be enlightened, more so enlightened. Because when we discuss these issues, you see them from a different light, from a different perspective. And you begin to understand that there is structure, there is sequencing, and that sort of thing to what is in the Constitution.
Okay.
We welcome your input, and we welcome any suggestions from you.
Okay. Cassandra, any closing remarks from you on your end?
Well, just to add to something Mr. Deputy stated earlier, how it's only a minute % of the populace that actually reads or even know of the Constitution. Others around election times are mainly focused on basic needs, food, shelter, providing for the children or their child, getting a scholarship. And I agree. And that is why we have forums like these where we try to raise awareness about the contents of the Constitution. And we are not purporting to be any quote unquote experts in the matter. I'm sure Mr. Ned agrees, We believe that the interpretation of the Constitution, given that we the people are the ultimate authority, lies in the discussions held by the people. But the only way to actually get to a consensus, if we want to talk about constitution reform, is to first know what we are reforming. So we have these discussions in public forum to just raise awareness so people know what the Constitution says. And hopefully the end result is that we can come to some decision, some consensus on reforming the Constitution in the future. So I appreciate the opportunity to sit here and have these discussions. And just like Mr. Ned, I encourage everyone and anyone to challenge us, you know, on anything that we're saying, and we will do our best, like he said, to defend our position. It's not the ultimate position, but again, it's a discussion on the Supreme Law of Grenada. So thank you to everyone who was part of the discourse, who chimed in, Mr. Deputy, Ms. Francis, Hudson, every one of you. Thank you so much.
All right. There you have it. That is Gemfm presentation of constitutional discussion every Friday night right here on Gemfm with Cassandra Michelle and Mr. Dave Ned. And feel free to let us know what you want to have discussed, and they will be willing and able to discuss it right here on Gemfm every Friday night going forward, as of tonight and thereafter. So again, the numbers are, the phone number is 437-980-7467, and my email, Gemfm email, is gemfm.ca@gmail.com. Don't forget, and join us tomorrow night. Will be 8:30, Delbert Baptist, Lincoln Deputy, Margaret Francis, among others, will be here to discuss the let me see if let me put it up here. I gotta pull up my notes here. Okay, sorry about that. We're talking about the Russian change of oil prices, buying power. I just want to kind of put in a different kind of context here to really get it, to say the right thing. Pardon me here. With the war and the price of oil and gas and the Russian changing and to us that they all be purchasing all with gold, and the US losing 30% of the US dollar value to the Russian the Chinese new venture of selling and buying oil. So tomorrow night that will be discussed right here. So come on tomorrow night with Delbert Baptist, Margaret Francis, and Lincoln Deputy, among others. So I got to get one more person to give me a confirmation for tomorrow. So that would be great. And tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, right here, yours truly, John Callis, will be here with Caribbean Connections. Join me tomorrow morning right here. Again, we talk about Caribbean things in Caribbean, things that are happening in the world, just anything, culture, anything. And if you have a book, you're a custodian, a writer, whatever you have, or whatever you're doing in the Caribbean, around the Caribbean, not necessarily Grenada, just call us here, write us, just you want to be on the show. We're more than happy to facilitate you and to have a discussion with you about what you're doing and your contribution and whatever it is, culturally, literally, literary work you have been doing and stuff like that. So we want to know. Talk to us right here, Gemfm. All right, Margaret, Lincoln Deputy, Hudson George, Texman Warren is here. I know she's here somewhere hiding. All right, Tex, good night. Yeah, Tex is there. She's there somewhere. She's part of the movement tonight. She's here. Hudson George, Yvonne Joseph, good night to you. And we have Steve Noel and Peter Bishop and many other people on the other side of the screen having the conversation, part of the conversation. So again, thank you guys. And love you guys so much. Again, Cassandra and Mr. David, thank you guys so much for being here. All right, God bless, and we'll see you guys tomorrow night or tomorrow morning. That is 10 o'clock right here.
Bye.
One love. Yes. And up for something. Cassandra, you'll talk to me tomorrow. We'll finalize some stuff for next week, all right? Both your Mr.
No problem.
All right.
doing nothing. As the world over, you just a freeloader. Problems every day, you have nothing to say. You rather run and hide before you take a side. I tell you, stand up for something or you will die for nothing. In your whole lifespan, you never make one stand. Stand up for something or you will die for nothing. People dying every day and you have nothing to say. Stand up for something or you will die for nothing. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up for something or you will die for nothing. Workers out striking, black cats protesting. Before you join the fight, you rather brave the strike. Don't like the condition, so they fight in the election. Before you sympathize, you rather criticize. I tell you, stand up for something or you will die for nothing. Corruption down with road, still you will not vote. Why? Stand up for something or you will die for nothing. Killing going on every day, you have nothing to say. Stand up for something or you will die for nothing. Stand up, stand up. Stand up for something or you will die for nothing. You talking the talk, people walking the walk. You happy as ever to be a fence watcher. Life's a precious thing for you to be within. Stand up and play your part and play it from your heart. I tell you, stand up for something or you will die for nothing. Get up, my friend, your life soon will end. I tell you, stand up for something or you will die for nothing. So your grandchildren too would be proud of you. I tell you, stand up for something or you will die for nothing. Stand up, stand up. Stand up for something or you will die for nothing.
I'm proud, I'm strong. I am a grenade, yes man. Grenada, Grenada, the land where I was born. I know you were suffering. Men have raped you and abused you and left you there crying. I devote my thought, my body and my soul. I stretch forth my helping hand to help you out. I haven't got diamond, silver, nor even gold, but blessings I give to its west, north and south. Oh, Grenada, Grenada, here I come. Sweet, sweet Grenada. Oh, let you down. Oh no, I'll always be your support, right here by your side. With my arms around you to wipe your weeping eyes. Oh yeah. It's quite a long time now since you have fallen back to the last rung of the ladder, and the neighbors stand up there and uttering no talk, but to help they just don't bother. Some of your friends have turned their backs on you. They don't want to see a friend with your name on it. Don't bother with them. One day you will rise up to. Cause in times to come, it's the bread they might talk to it. So listen, let me go. Oh, Grenada, Grenada, there I come. Sweet, sweet Grenada. I will never, ever, ever let you down. Oh no, I'll always be your support, right here by your side. With my arms around you to wipe your weeping eyes. Let me go. Listen, it's time that you take a stand to defend your position from all those smart rip-off scams who just come to take a bite and make their own decision and boast to the world that they are the reigning champ. While your friends them happy had times they were going through, they still wouldn't help you out if you beg them please. But woe unto them, little do they know that a good name is better than great riches. Oh, Grenada, Grenada, here I come. Sweet, sweet Grenada. I will never, ever, ever let you down. Oh no, I'll always be your support, right here by your side. With my arms around you to wipe your weeping eyes. Grenada, here I come. Sweet, sweet Grenada. I will never, ever, ever let you down. Oh no, I'll always be your support, right here by your side. With a big festival to wipe your weeping eye. Let me go. If you feel living like me, feel free to say, I love my country. Oh yeah, Grenada. Oh, I love you, Grenada. I'll always be right by your side, Grenada. Oh. Grenada in Asia, South and Sydney. Grenada in Asia, South and Sydney. Mami oh mama, lifestyle flavors from the Canada. Mami oh mama, flavors of Grenada in wonder. Lifestyle flavors. Best I say, the best I say, the best I say. I like taste and spices. Best I say, the best I say, the best I say. Garlic oil and vegan pesto. I telling you that's the way to go. Hot fast on the green with seasoning. Flavor that will love your body. Strictly organic so it's healthy. That will make your food so tasty. Vitamin D, calcium and iron. #1 seasoning on the island. Lifestyle flavors. Please contact us at 347-697.
Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. I tell you why. I tell you why. I tell you why. Holy weeks that make no sense. Bad grammar, your nonsense. I tell you why. But pretty girl love it to show their content. I tell you why. Before a young girl reach the age of 16, I tell you why. She practicing to wine to be the next soca queen. I tell you why. And by the time she reached the age of 18, she become the #1 dancing soca queen. I tell you why. They say it's Alice Nines that teach them so. I tell you why. Little Rick tell them to go down low. I tell you why. Mr. Killer tell them to roll it holy. I tell you why. Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. I tell you why. I tell you why. I tell you why. Holy weeks that make no sense. Bad grammar, pure nonsense. I tell you why. Mighty Diaro takes soca international. He said the music was fundamental. Today they say soca music gone phenomenal. I tell you why. I tell you why, I tell you why, I tell you why. Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. Some of the girls gone to college and university. They had a diploma and they had a degree. They work in the independent, they want to show their content. I tell you why. Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. Wine to the side, wine to the side, bend down low, touch your toe. Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. Calypso teach them to dance soca music in time. Now they get so wassy, they only want to wine. Alice Nines teach them to show their bumper. I tell you why. Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, I tell you why. Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. I tell you why, I tell you why, I tell you why. Some soca artists today did learn from the mighty Sparrow. They don't even want to listen to our Jambo. I tell you why. Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. Bend back and touch you. Pick up your leg and show them so. I tell you why. Look at what they're doing to soca music. I tell you why. Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, I tell you why. 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 Tell you why.
DJ Soapaholic are the maddest and the mad baddest. Me, tell pieces.
I'm a Grenadian to my heart and soul. Friends, I would travel all over this world. Anyway I go, I bump